Hey everyone, how's it going? Dan here from PromptHub. Happy Tuesday. Already halfway through October, and today we are going to be talking about everything you need to be doing before you write your first prompt for a new project or feature or whatever you happen to be trying to ship to production. And so basically, this comes down to two steps: setting up your success criteria and then evaluations and test cases. And we decided to kind of put this video and blog post together because whenever we help teams, we see that they'll often jump right into writing prompts, and while that can be good, you might not be setting yourself up for success. For example, how would you know if a prompt is working well if you haven't defined what that looks like? So this will be kind of just a pre-prompt checklist, essentially, of a couple things that you can do very quickly to make sure that you are set up for success. So starting with success criteria, essentially what this is will be your North Star while you are building this, LLM-based feature or application or whatever that might be. It's a quantifiable metric you can measure over time. It helps align the team, and through testing, it will show you kind of where things are falling short, whether that's in the context that's being served to the model, like short-term memory issues, long-term memory issues, the prompt, the model itself, and it kind of can help show you you can get to where you need to go. So in terms of what makes good success criteria, I think the SMART framework here that we, developed is a strong word, but put together and spelled out is basically you want something specific, so nothing like ambiguous, nothing like improved chatbot responses. That's not helpful. It's hard to measure that. So you need something that's specific, measurable. Quantitative is really what you're aiming for here. It can be qualitative as long as you measure that alongside another quantitative metric, but that gets kind of nuanced. Something that's achievable based on the current capabilities of the model you're using. Relevant to the kind of user value that you are driving, rather than just like some technical metrics. And I think you want to time bound it, just so that you can have kind of these like levels that you say, hey, we want to hit this before 2 to 3 weeks or whatever before we can ship this. So it kind of keeps the project moving as well. So we'll look at a couple of good and bad examples. So we recently launched our meta prompting prompt generator at PromptHub, so you can just input a task description and then it will output a prompt for you. So a bad criteria would be something like increase user engagement. It's vague and doesn't really capture the value of what we're doing. A better one would be increase the number of users that are creating prompts with this specific tool by a certain percentage over the next 3 months. It's specific, measurable, time bound, and it defines what we're trying to do, and that should align with user value as well. Next up, let's say we're building a chatbot to help people in our company make order requests to vendors. A bad one would be, handling order requests effectively. A better one would be, hey, let's successfully process 95% of the requests without having to have a human involved, by the end of the year, at the end of the quarter. Again, specific, measurable, and quantifiable. Sentiment classification. This one's actually much easier. Because this is like a very quantitative measure because you know what the answers are going to be. So you could even just say an accuracy level, since we know we should be able to get 90% accuracy or 95% accuracy. You can use F1 scores as well, based on like a certain volume. Content generation. So we're generating LinkedIn posts or social posts. A bad criteria would be, hey, make good posts. A better one would be driving that back to engagement on that specific platform in some way. You could also do something where you are also looking at time savings, but it should be in addition to. So you can always have multiple criteria. So time savings plus maybe the engagement would be good here. And there's a whole bunch of other common ones that we listed out on our in our blog post. Here are a few. So how well it performs the task, how consistent it is, tone, style, accuracy. Then things like price and latency are important as well. But those are all listed in below. And mistakes to avoid, again, vague goals is like the biggest one. Not having the criteria aligned with user value is another one. You really want to make sure that what you are setting up as your success criteria makes sense for your feature and what actually is helping users. Not setting a timeline. These timelines help keep the project moving and see how you are tracking progress and kind of aligns the team. And then failing to iterate. We'll kind of look at this in the next section more, but you should be tracking how you are doing against your success criteria and figuring out how you can make it better. And again, we will touch more on this kind of as we go through, but good ways to kind of track and validate your success criteria is, firstly, talking to your users. I think there's probably no replacement for that. Running A/B tests with different variants of your prompt can be helpful, and we can help with this through our branching and Git-like versioning. This can help you make different tweaks to prompts and see how those perform. Collecting user feedback, monitoring requests, looking how people are actually interacting with whatever you're building is always helpful, and then iterating based on that. And now we'll move on to evaluations and test cases. This is the second part. So we've decided what we want to measure, and now we're going to kind of talk about how we actually kind of can do that. And this graphic is pulled from the Anthropic documentation, who has really good resources on this, about this kind of flow of iterating and testing your prompts based on evaluations and test cases against your criteria. So we'll touch on choosing the right evaluation method. We'll look at a couple of common evaluation grading methods, and then talk about how you can think about this in relation to test cases as well, because they kind of go hand in hand. So in terms of what an evaluation is, there are 4 key parts. There's the prompt, what you send to the model. There's the output, the response from the model. There's what you're comparing it to, so the golden answer, this is the ideal or expected, and then a score, which is the measure of the output against that golden answer. There are generally 3 types of ways to run evaluations. One is code-based, so this is really easy, good and fast and quick, and for tasks like exact match, sentiment analysis, things like that, where you know what the answer is. Human grading, the vibe test. This is better for complex or subjective tasks, and honestly should be kind of mixed in unless you're doing something where the output is known. So if you're doing content generation, creative writing, anything like that, a human in the loop here is going to be helpful. And then LLM-based grading, so using an LLM to grade outputs. It's very popular, obviously, for a number of reasons, because it's fast, and you can do it at scale really well. So this is kind of things that are in between exact match and the very complex outputs, and we think it's really helpful to have these in the mix as well. And we wrote about this back in November of last year, about using LLMs as evaluators and how we think about that. And so we'll run through some quick examples here. These are all listed in the blog post as well, but tone and coherence for a legal assistant using an LLM-based coherence evaluation. So basically we have this legal assistant, and we want to make sure that it is being coherent based on whatever task that it is running. So we'll run a prompt that will essentially look at that, and then we'll run a comparison against it. Context utilization for support chatbots. We want to make sure our chatbot is leveraging the context effectively. And so we could, by doing that, we could feed the output into a prompt that says, rate this chatbot's response on a scale of 1 to 5, which is a Likert scale, where 1 is ignores the context and 5 it uses all the context, and then it will output a number, and then we could do that in aggregate and make some decisions. And for the sake of time, we won't run through the other ones here, but there's a bunch more. Touching on this last point here, the really important thing with test cases, and the only thing that really needs to be driven home, is that you need to have test cases where random things are being input, essentially, because users are going to do that. What happens if the input is blank? What happens if the input is some derogatory content? What happens if you are expecting an image but no image is sent through, instead of just a description? So you start with the happy path scenarios, of course, and think about what does typical usage look like, and then think of ambiguous inputs, irrelevant, contradictory information. You really want to kind of build these out, and you can leverage LLMs to do this, which I think is a really great use case of giving an LLM a few of your most basic inputs, maybe the happy path one, and tell it to kind of build out these edge case test cases as well. And this should be kind of iteratively expanding based on real user data. So as you're monitoring these requests and you're seeing things come through, you should be expanding your test case based on places where your prompt is falling short, and updating the prompt to then account for those, and then retesting against those failed cases to see if you now pass. So 3 things to take away. Evaluations are not a one-time thing. They should be continuous to always be improving. Automation can help with this, whether you're using LLMs or code-based evaluators, and we can help with this inside of PromptHub. And then your test cases should really be diverse. And now with all of that done, you have your test cases, your evaluation, your success criteria in place, you can move on to the prompt engineering and see how you can kind of try to hit those metrics. All right, that is it for today. Thanks, guys.